The Arch Publications Podcast.
Welcome to the Arch Publications Podcast. I'm Katy O'Regan and I am back in the Hub in Middlewich today because we've spoken to Doug from the Hub before, who him and his partner Lily run the Hub. It also has offices and there are some great businesses here, including JP Goldman. And I'm talking to Daniel, who is one of the co-owners of JP Goldman, who's fairly new to Middlewich, but they've decided to come here because it's a great place. So firstly, I just want to have a little bit of background about you, Daniel. So what's your history then?
So I started as a lawyer, now managed a business. My career path was quite typical, really. So I started at large corporate firms, sort of paralegal. I worked my way up, got my own caseloads.
Always in property then?
Always in property, yeah. So very specialist, very sort of niche. Met Nick at one of the corporate firms, who's the co-owner, director. And we sort of reacquainted later on and decided to go ahead and do it for ourselves.
And that was in 2015?
Yes, it was, yeah. So with all, as you'd imagine, the sort of regulation and whatnot, we started trading in 2016.
Do you have to jump through quite a lot of hoops then?
Yeah, you need your licence, you need your insurance to get your licence, you need all sorts of policies and procedures in place, on top of all the usual stuff that you need to do to be a business. So it took a while, and then we kind of stopped and just waited for the tax year. Took a bit of a break and added a few months ourselves, just a bit of a break and a recharge, and then it's been manic since. And
is it still just the two of you, or have you got more people within the business now?
Yeah, we have a fair few staff now, so there's myself, Nick, and 14 employees.
Wow!
Yeah. So,
14? So
yeah.
Are they like secretaries and...
Varies from sort of administrative staff, solicitors, people who deal with, we've got one person now dedicated to sort of sales and marketing, which is the first time we've ever had that kind of a department, if you can call it that. Yeah. Yeah, that's us. I mean, it's still all property, that's the focus. Still all doing the same things. Most of our early recruits were former colleagues and people we knew and people from our network and whatnot, and that's where we are.
So you've got two offices, haven't you? The business originally started in Urmston, am I right? And you came to Middlewich. Was there a reason why you came here? Like I mentioned before, obviously it's a great place, but was there something else behind it?
A few reasons really that sort of all converged. Friends locally, so a friend locally started an estate agency. You
can name him.
Yeah, so down at Umbrella Homes, started up on this very street. Came to see him, liked the sound, just wish him well, be nosy, look at his office, that kind of thing. I live sort of South Manchester, sort of historically what would have been Cheshire. The old border was the Mersey. Yeah. So I'm fairly equidistant between here and the office I travel to anyway.
That's a big word.
Equidistant, yeah. I won't count the letters. So it was close. Met Doug, who you've mentioned at the intro. Doug and Lily were kicking off the business hub here. So it kind of started out as, our hot desk in Middlewich. And I just enjoyed it, like the town, like coming somewhere else. A bit of headspace, and it's sort of evolved, and now we've got a dedicated space of our own.
Yeah, so if you come down Wheelock Street and you can see the hub, then you see Premier Doors of Cheshire. Your office is within the back of there, isn't it?
So we've got a self-contained office here with just at the back. They've got all the hub facilities, so there's meeting rooms and tea, coffee, all the rest of it for meeting clients. And we've just really enjoyed working in the area and being in the area, and it's hopefully going to snowball from there.
What is it particularly you like about the people of Middlewich?
So we've had a few clients come in, and to be honest, I've always enjoyed interacting with clients face to face, and it's no different here to Urmston. We've had everyone that's come in has been pleasant. It's enjoyable. It's different types of property, different property titles. Different local authority. There's added interest, and it's nice to work outside the area and see and learn new things. And it's
when somebody buys a property, you need a solicitor. I mean, it's literally a given that you can't buy a property without a solicitor. Am I right?
Yes, essentially, yeah. The very rare occasions where you can, if you didn't have a lender, would it be not recommended?
Right. So what? I think it's probably something that people might do maybe maximum of 3 times in their lives, maybe. maybe interact with a solicitor during this process?
Yeah, it's infrequent. Yeah, so it's one of those processes where we often see first-time buyers. Obviously, it's the first time they've ever done it. It's very, very different to renting. We sometimes see people who are moving, having lived in their house for 15, 16, plus years, and obviously by then you've forgotten and it's changed anyway. It's a long time for it to change, and digitisation and all that kind of thing. It's an evolving process. That's one of the facets of the job, really, is making sure people are aware what's going on.
So let's just say I'm a first-time buyer and I've never ever been in contact with a solicitor before in this situation. In fact, it might be the only time, unless I've been arrested, I've been in contact with a solicitor at all. And I haven't been arrested, which is good news. What happens? How does it work?
Yeah, so the general process is, seller sells, buyer buys, and it's a buyer beware process. So the job when you're selling is to sell it and to make sure your client doesn't misrepresent any of the facts, and you gather the title, you gather the seller's forms, so all the things a buyer would want to know. So you fill in big long forms about neighbours, planning issues, environmental issues, fixtures, fittings, what you're going to leave, what you're going to take.
Can I just ask you about the neighbours thing? I've always wondered this. If you don't disclose something, say you've had a fallout with your neighbour, and there's been a couple of incidents where they phoned the police or whatever, and you don't disclose that, and then the person moves in and finds that the neighbour's a nightmare, can you kind of hold the person before responsible?
Yes, that's a misrepresentation. So misrep, is it shorthand, would need pursuing through the courts, and basically the court will try to quantify what your loss is, if you like. So in that scenario, it would, to be fair, take some pretty terrible neighbours for you to successfully argue that either the property's worth less than what you paid because of them, or that you simply wouldn't have bought it, and all the cost and rigmarole, and you might sell it at less than you bought for because you're rushing or whatever. That would be your loss. You'd have to kind of quantify your loss and pursue it through the courts.
Do many of those things go to court? Because you don't really hear about them.
Not really. I think from my experience, most clients will tick the box. It's really, really, it's right there in your face. Have you had any disputes? Tick yes, tick no. There's no wiggle room. There's no grey area. You answer the question. So firstly, most clients are upfront about it. On the rare occasions that someone isn't, often neighbour disputes go away when one of the parties moved.
I was just going to say that, because sometimes it's just a clash of personalities. So it can be two sets of good people who've clashed and just don't get on, and that relationship's lost. And the people who remain are probably relieved that someone new has come in, and probably actually might end up being the best neighbours in the world, because you actually want to not go through that again. Yeah. So you're kind of extra nice to the new people. But yeah, there's obviously more severe things you can lie about. Like what? You can be halfway through a huge planning dispute with the council and say that there's nothing going on there. I mean, that would be our job to spot, because you get information direct from the council as well. Yeah. But just for instance, there's all sorts. So these are kind of the pitfalls, aren't they? If somebody, say you've lived, I mean, we don't own a view. That's a big thing, isn't it? People often say, especially in Cheshire, houses are popping up all over. People are like, why are they building in front of my house? And you don't own a view. So you're the one then who will check through that there's no planning application in for 400 houses in the field behind someone's house.
The search we do at local authority is actually plot specific. So it actually won't check surrounding land. But that's something we always advise when we give our report on the search.
Okay.
But you can go on, say...
Oh, it's dead easy.
You can go on the Cheshire Planning Portal and you can postcode plus, and you'll find it. There's also a bit of a safety net, as in the seller, obviously, if it's neighbouring your property, they're going to build behind, and you've got this wonderful outlook out the back. Bellway Homes have got their eyes on it, and they've got a planning application in. The owners will receive notices through the post, and one of the questions in the seller's forms is, have you had any notices about, local proposals and things?
Okay, yeah.
So, they're Law Society standardised forms, so they've evolved over time to fairly well capture everything, and it would just be known in the community as well. A lot of what we do is risk profiling, looking at risk. So it's, if someone's moving from Manchester, as an example, out to Cheshire, they might well have no idea. If someone's moving around the corner, you'd expect them to already know about. Yeah,
that they're building a new railway line or something, exactly. HS2 is going to go right across the back garden.
Yeah, so you'd still give the same advice, but you might just apply that extra layer of care for the person who might well have no idea.
So have you had to build your knowledge up locally then? Is that something that you do as a solicitor then? You'll say, right, I'm going to get myself to get to know everything that's going on in this community?
Yeah, there's not, obviously different types of title. When Manchester, for instance, is full of leasehold, long leases, 999 years.
That's so true,
So it's nice to deal with more high proportion freehold properties. It's
all these things. That's what you're there for, isn't it? You're there to simplify it for the client.
Basically, yeah. We look at all this and we report on it in terms that are understandable and in stages, and then obviously there's the conversations like this can be had, we're basically there to act for sellers when they're selling and make sure they don't come a cropper and there's any lingering issue, because you want to have it sold and be done and be gone. We're also kind of a facility to pay off, mortgage charges and things. If there's an existing mortgage, we'll redeem it, make sure there's no charges left on the property for the buyer. And then if we're acting for the buyer, that's sort of the riskier position to be in, and all those things we just discussed and loads more, we just check it all through.
Do you think the way people buy houses in the UK, in England, it's different in Scotland, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the same in Wales though, isn't it?
England and Wales, yeah.
Do you think it's a better process in Scotland, or would you say, because don't they do this thing where they you put in a bid or something like that?
It's I've also never practiced in Scotland, but we've had clients who moved there and have got a bit of obviously an academic interest in sort of reading about these things. It's a bit more akin to the American system. So when you buy, you truly bought the property. It's much rarer, possibly even impossible to be gesundered.
Does that happen a lot?
To be honest, I don't really. Whether it's where we practice, the area we work in, the estate agents in our area might all be a bit professional, and then they might prevent things like that from happening. I can't say I've seen it much in my career, but it definitely happens, and it's definitely a possibility. There's absolutely no, until you exchange, which is the contract becoming binding, there's absolutely no protection for either the seller or the buyer. The buyer can pay thousands in surveys. They can get really emotionally invested in the property. They can start, it would be against our advice, but they can start ordering furniture, looking at this, that, the other, and the seller can just go, you know what, this guy's offered me slightly more, I'm going to take that. Or the property's simply coming off the market. Can and does happen. The Scottish system is designed to make that a bit more of a rarity. So you sort of, when you bid, you've bought it, and it's sort of subject to certain inspections and checks. And
that sounds so much better.
Certainly better for the parties involved, I imagine. Yeah. Although I've never moved in Scotland.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do anecdotally have clients who might be moving from Scotland here or moving from here to Scotland, and without fail, they all prefer that side of it.
Is that a bit like when you go to an auction then? It's sort of a similar thing. It's
kind of like a hammer down auction. Yeah, you've got cards on the table. You're a genuine buyer. Make your offer, skin in the game, as it were, and you. But there are the safety nets of the various inspections and things. Like I said, I'm no expert on it, and should a Scotch lawyer listen to this, I apologise.
Listen, a Scotch lawyer will listen to this. Don't worry, they'll listen to it in America as well. Talking about America, it seems to be very trendy to be working in real estate, and I have noticed the way that they talk about selling property now in the UK. They've changed the language in the way they say things. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of Homes Under the Hammer. And even on Homes Under the Hammer, they've changed the way that they refer to things to the American way. Last and final, I've heard them say things like that. Oh, I tell you what it was on, location. And I was just like, I don't like this. We're just being influenced too much by the American process.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. You can word it that way, but in America it means last and final. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you word it like that here. It isn't really, because the next week anyone can just walk away.
But they make so much more money in America. I have a feeling they do.
Our laws are older.
Yes.
The nation is younger than ours, and the laws are a bit more.
Properties aren't as old.
Yeah, properties aren't as old. I think in America and I don't know enough, but I believe that the realtor does the legals. So it's a bit of a combined conveyancer and estate agency role. Because the law's simpler, it probably makes it possible. So that you do see on these programs, don't you, $1 million list and all that kind of thing. You see the ridiculous commissions. It is kind of a dual job, I suppose.
Right. We're in 2023 now. 2022, on reflection, was a really strange year because no one knew what was going to happen at the beginning. The housing market had been amazing, hadn't it? Late 2021. And then 2022, it kind of changed a lot. What do you see happening in 2023 with the housing market?
Wow. So many different things.
Just answer the question. Yeah. Solve the problem.
I personally see it slowing somewhat. Right. Yeah, there's been real sustained growth and volume and price increase, but now against the backdrop of rising interest rates, possible recession, doom and gloom. Everyone's feeling doom and gloom out there. Most sensible commentators are predicting that it will slow.
Does it need to though?
Perhaps.
I mean, to just kind of get things back on track, because it has been going up and up and up.
Depends who you are. If you ask the person who's wanting to sell the house, they'll be gutted. If you ask, if even buyers aren't really winning if it slows down, because it's what you may save in price, and there's a bit of talk that prices will come down a little bit. You're just giving the bank an interest. So it's a personal circumstance whether all these things are temporary though, and you just take the market as it comes. And because obviously we're a business and we deal with lots of businesses, but I've been looking into recessions, and they tend to happen every 15 years. So the last one was 2008, wasn't it, because of the global banks issues, and before that it was kind of early 90s, and then before that it was early 80s. So it's about every 15 years, and that's the way the economy goes. It goes ups and downs, and I just keep saying that to people. It will end. You've just got to hold your nerve and do your very best that you can do. And there's the unique backdrop with the pandemic, the reaction to the pandemic in property. There was a unique kind of scenario where everyone else seemed to be slowing down and we were speeding up, and that was driven by kind of an artificial stamp duty holiday. So stamp duty was cut back, and then that was extended near the end of what was meant to be the holiday to kind of keep it going. And it's a funny backdrop, and I just...
Something you'll probably never ever see in your life.
No, I mean, every time there's a recession or a poor economic climate, and it usually follows a bit of a kind of artificial boom. So you got .com crash, you got a house crash at the 2008. You see films about it, don't you? And it's funny because there'll be people working in hospitality who are closed for periods of time, or there'll be people in sectors that were really hurt by the pandemic who didn't have that boom before the bust.
Yeah.
So it's who knows what 2023 will bring.
Just going back to JP Goldman, yes. If people are interested in getting to know you as a solicitor because they're thinking about moving and they maybe found a property they like, do they come and see you before they find a property, or do they kind of engage with you and say, look, we're moving, or how does it work that way?
They can come see us whenever suits them, but what usually happens is we're kind of a follow-on. So people will have usually visited an estate agent, or if they're buying and need to know what they can afford, a mortgage broker first. So they usually see a professional in a different field first, and then that professional will often say, look, you're going to need a solicitor, and then the people will either deal with that when it comes, once they've actually got a bid accepted and they're ready, or they'll come to us. They'll say, my mortgage broker, I'm just arranging my mortgage now, I'm going to be buying shortly, and they'll get a quote, and they'll know who we are, they'll know where we are, and then we'll just say, look, come back to us when you're ready.
And are your fees set, or does it vary on the value of property?
Our fees are fairly set, mainly because we're quite geographically tight in terms of where we operate. A lot of firms will operate on a sort of national national scale, and they'll get work, they'll essentially buy it online by one method or another. So it might be traditional online advertising, or they might come to arrangement with sort of online comparison sites. That isn't our model. We work within the community that we're based, or communities that we're based now. There's the odd huge, more valuable property, and there is some variety, but because we operate just within kind of one area which has its kind of value range, we largely, for simplicity, our fee is the same. The variables with us more come down to kind of complexity. Right. So if you're buying a flat or a new build property, there simply just is extra work involved.
Oh, is there? Right.
There's
okay.
just no way around it. It's a bigger job, and we quote accordingly. But as every firm should, and as the regulator tells us we should, all that is as upfront as possible. If you see the word flat, you incorporate the leasehold fee, we call it.
And do you have like a sinking fund with lots of flats and things like that?
Yeah, there's well-run blocks above a certain size should really have a sinking fund, because a management company cannot know when they're going to need a new roof, or there's going to be some other issue with some of these places have lifts, the lift breaks.
Yeah, I lived in a flat and I lived on the ground floor, and I had still paid the service charge for the lift and never bloody used it.
yeah. So
I felt like going up and down in it at least once a day just to get my money's worth.
Take the ride, yeah.
Yeah, I'm paying for this.
What we do is we look at 3 years accounts. We try and get a feel for it being whether it's a well-run management company, because if a block isn't well-run, they'll estimate your service charge for the year. They'll spend way more than they estimated, and then
send you a bill.
And then, two options. They either ask you all for a little bit of cash there and then, or it just goes up massively next year. Oh. You often see it where high, low, because the high years might be a reaction to a problem because there was no sinking funds, or they simply didn't collect enough, and then the low years are kind of over-ambitious estimations, whereas the well-run ones will be steady. You know what your service charge is. There's always money in the sinking fund. If something goes wrong, it's there, it's covered. Your service charge might go up slightly to rebuild the fund, but standard is get 3 years accounts, and you kind of paint the picture.
And that's something that you do then? You do all that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You do loads.
Yeah, nobody knows really what you touched on earlier. It's unless you're some kind of property investor, you're not coming across us. And by the time you use us next, you've long since forgotten about the time you last used, and it changes so fast. But yeah, that's all in our remit.
Welcome to Middlewich, I must just say that as well. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, we are advertising you in the magazine, but they can either pop down to the hub.
Yes.
That's probably the easiest thing to do, isn't it? Or just Google JP Goldman.
Pop to the hub, Google, give us a call, email, all the usual ways. And
if someone just wants some advice because they're thinking about moving and it's a big scary thing, they can come and see you and you can just say. Yeah, we often get that. So we'll get sort of people who, it might be, can I just check this before I even make an offer, Like we've just spoke about flats. Someone might go and they're like, oh God, there's all this stuff going on. There's a lift, there's nice gardens that seem well manicured. They might just want to know in advance, what's the deal there? How does it work? Do I really want to live in a flat? And that's just a conversation to be had. And it, rather than put an offer in, paying for your searches or the rest of it, arranging your mortgage for a particular property and then deciding that you don't, it doesn't suit you, that it might, there are occasions where it might be best just to ask a question. Can I just ask one thing? A lot of these things about houses, I suppose, relevant to each individual case, isn't it? And there are so many different things that could happen. But the government shared ownership scheme, is that quite a difficult one legally to deal with? Yeah,
shared ownership is one of the more complicated areas we deal in.
Yeah, well, it's good though for people.
It's a brilliant pathway. For some people, it's there are a lot of these schemes, and there's help to buy ISAs. There's specific stuff for MOD staff members. They have a MOD loan kind of scheme towards deposits. Certain builders will put incentives in. They'll pay X%, and then they might cover your stamp duty, whatever it is. And there are ways to help buyers, and they're needed because it's so hard to buy a property. It's so, particularly if we rarely see a single first-time buyer. It's invariably couples, because it's so hard to buy a property even when there's two of you. And it's any help, any of these schemes, obviously are welcomed. They all come with their own nuances, and it's a bit of more swatting up for us to do, but they're definitely needed.
Yeah. Well, you do sound, and I'm sure you are, very knowledgeable, and that's what you need when you have a solicitor, when you're buying a property, somebody who is really, really knowledgeable.
I will say that I've got staff who are much more intelligent.
Okay. You're going to say I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to property.
No. I'm one of the founders and whatnot, but I'll ask the staff more questions than they ask me. Yeah. We've got some brilliant people. There's you get a feel for it. That certain people just understand shared ownership. Certain people you still get the odd unregistered property where it's the old paper deeds. I'd love those. People will come and ask me about those.
I've got our paper deeds from our house, and we tried to give it to when we sold the house and built. We tried to give it to the solicitor. They didn't want it.
It becomes a new registered electronic title. It's all digital now.
Yeah, so we've still got the paper copies, and it's got lists of all the people who own the house. Yeah. And it was really sad because during the sort of 80s, it was taken by the bank. So the people who had it lost it, and it felt really sad to me that I was reading that in these documents, because the house has got such a history, especially one that's 120 years old.
You should get your original conveyance, the one that's 19 whatever. Yeah, and you should get it framed. I've seen people do that.
Oh, that's a great idea.
It looks nice. Yeah. So we've actually got a little plan, because we've got some deeds that people...
You can't read the writing. It's amazing.
Yeah. So we've got some deeds that banks would dematerialise, which is a fancy word for pulp them. That clients don't want, like they won't, buyers, lawyers not interested in having them. And doing what we do, we're considering framing a few and having them in our meeting room.
Oh yeah, you're right. The text, it's written so nicely.
Yeah, some of them look lovely. They do.
It was owned by like some kind of duke of somewhere. It was his land, and then somebody he knew built these 4 end of row, this terrace for his wife. It was like, it's got this really nice story to it.
It does. It tells a story, and that obviously it's necessary. Everything's gone digital, and it is necessary for many, many reasons. But you don't see that story now. Yeah, you get the deeds, and it's all time coded. You download a title from the Land Registry portal, and it will say the time to the minute that you downloaded it, the date you downloaded it on. That's what the title looks like there and then. You work off that one title. Yeah. You don't see how long the people before them owned it for.
I will absolutely do that. Because that's a really good idea. I'll take a picture and show it to you. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like I've taken up too much of your time, and I could ask you loads of questions. I'm really interested in property because I watch Homes Under the Hammer so much, like I mentioned before. And I think everybody thinks they could be a property mogul, don't they?
It is a passion in this country. People love property and property programs and design, and
And it's been really nice to talk to you, and thank you for being on the Arch Publications podcast. That's Daniel from JP Goldman.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Business Insights with Arch Publications, hosted by Katy O'Regan.